then we get some swimmers who are really good. Daniel Loader got 3 medals at a World Long Course Champs in 1994. Lauren Boyle did the same thing. She also broke a world short course record in Wellington in 2015. But now we've got 2 swimmers, Lewis Clareburt and Erica Fairweather, who have both medalled at 2 different FINA World Long Course Champs. Now, that doesn't happen very often at all. In fact, the only other person who has done it is Lauren Boyle.
Right.
Daniel didn't, and so we've got this these 2 swimmers who are doing it in 2 different meets, and we've got another one called Eve Thomas, who did all 100% personal best, 3 events, 3 personal bests, and got top 4 in 2 of her events. She's one to look out for.
But Dave, tell us about the coaches. What's your sense of the state of the coaches across the nation? Are we also getting really high performance from them? Because the evidence would suggest that we are.
Well, I mean, it's weird really, because if you look at where the swimmers are swimming, Erica Fairweather is down in Otago with Caitlin Deans, who was also in the relay that broke 2 New Zealand records. Lewis Clareburt has moved up to Auckland. He's with a group of guys up in Auckland. But if you look at the top swimmers who are doing well, they are either in Otago or in Auckland.
No.
And so that's why, for example, one of our youngest swimmers called Monique Rosowski, who came second at World Juniors, at the last World Juniors, has moved to Auckland, as have a few others, because living in the sticks, you don't get the coaching that you need,
Dave,
you get the performance that you want.
It's so exciting. I've got to sneak this in. John says, it is no irony that you're celebrating swimming and closing a pool in the same minute.
Yeah, exactly.
Hey, Dave, good to have you here.
I know. It is.
Yeah. Chris Clark, Jenny Morton, fantastic stuff. Thanks for being with me today on a Monday. And we're going out with a bit of heart of gold. Someone says, what about Sophie Pascoe? Indeed. All right, I'll be back tomorrow, 3:45. Lisa Owen and Checkpoint is next.
Keep me searching for a heart of gold. I've been a miner for a heart of gold.
Kei te whakarongo mai koe ki te reo irirangi o Aotearoa. This is Checkpoint on RNZ National. I'm Lisa Owen. Yeah, Heidi Akine, can our fragile nation still afford tax cuts? We ask an expert. The government crackdown on beneficiaries has started. MSD is officially told to use all levers to get people off benefits, including sanctions. We will have the details. The cost of a free education. What can a school actually charge you for? And what's an optional donation? The poo pile up, that means a popular walking track is a no-go for day trampers. We talk to a top mountain guide about how to clean things up. And the itsy bitsy teeny weeny mankini that has caused a gigantic stir. Equestrian Shane Rose on chafing and qualifying for the Olympics.
RNZ News at 5 o'clock. Tēnā tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. The government has told the Ministry of Social Development to ramp up benefit sanctions effective from June this year. It's also asked the agency to complete work check-ins with beneficiaries considered ready for employment after 26 weeks. Minister for Social Development and Employment, Louise Upston, says the former Labour government didn't make full use of the existing sanctions system. She says it needs to be used to break the shackles of welfare dependency.
These check-ins will make sure job seekers are taking adequate steps to find employment and they are getting the correct support from MSD to help them overcome any challenges they face.
The new work check-ins will cost $1.2 million each year, funded within MSD baselines. Hatohone St John is promising that patients will still get the help they need, despite the fact fewer ambulances will be available in some areas. The sector's biggest union, the Ambulance Association, warns St John's cost cutting by leaving roster gaps when crews call in sick or go on leave could cost lives. However, a spokesperson for Hatohone St John, Dan Ose, says it won't affect the quality of patient care overall.
It means that there may be a reduced number of ambulances at times in areas where we have good levels of cover. And so we do have a predictable workload. We deploy our resources at different times a day using 5 years of data, and that's what we're using to guide us here. What I can absolutely assure you is that there's going to be no individual area left without cover.
Dan Ose says Hatohone St John's deficit for this financial year is $5.5 million. Residents evacuated from a grass fire in North Canterbury's Waikare Valley are being allowed to return home. Fire and Emergency says the 300-hectare blaze is under control again after jumping its containment line this afternoon. It's being fought by more than 50 firefighters backed by 2 helicopters. Incident Commander Des Irving says the flames have been fanned by high winds this afternoon.
The fire is now contained, but the fire's not out. Right, there's a big difference. Containment means that you can go home tonight, but you still have to be vigilant because there's still a live fire burning heading towards Glenmark Drive, but it's still some kilometres away.
Des Irving says residents who return home should remain vigilant and prepared for another evacuation. The fire will be monitored by ground crews overnight. Emergency services in Christchurch are asking people to avoid the Port Hills for at least another week as firefighting efforts to fully extinguish the large blaze continue. Christchurch City Council Incident Controller Brent Smith says the city and neighbouring Selwyn district would remain under a state of emergency until a multi-agency effort was no longer required.
Having a look at the fire ground, it is a really difficult piece of terrain to work on. Also, for those keen recreational enthusiasts, just a reminder also that we still have the walking tracks and cycling tracks west of Rapaki closed, just until further notice.
Brent Smith says for the most part the public has been patient and respectful during the event, which has made a huge difference for those working to fight the fire. A small section of the terrace in Wellington is closed because of a fire in the Treasury building. A spokesperson for Treasury says staff were evacuated at about 4 o'clock after an electrical fire broke out in the basement of the building. The terrace is closed between Bowen Street and Aurora Terrace. Police are asking drivers to avoid the area. And a rat-plagued Dunedin supermarket won't reopen until Thursday at the earliest. The Ministry for Primary Industries is investigating after more than 20 rats were caught in Countdown Dunedin South before its parent company Woolworths closed the store earlier this month for pest elimination. New Zealand Food Safety Deputy Director General Vincent Arbuckle says the investigation might take months. He says the store will remain closed until Food Safety and Woolworths are certain control measures are working. To sport now, and a gold medal in his last race at the World Swimming Champs has restored Lewis Clarebert's waning self-confidence. Clarebert won gold in the 400-metre individual medley in Doha and says it's a timely boost ahead of the Paris Olympics later this year. Clarebert says over the last couple of years his confidence has slipped.
It's been a tough couple of years for me. I think I lost a lot of confidence in the last couple of years in myself and my ability. And I guess having that moment where I was able to swim a pretty good time, I guess it just gives me more confidence now moving towards Paris.
Rugby Australia has struck an 11th-hour deal to ensure the crisis-hit Melbourne Rebels will be able to host the ACT Brumbies in their Super Rugby Pacific opener on Friday. The club went into administration with millions of dollars of debts at the end of last month, but will now be able to see out the season. New Zealand Sail GP driver Peter Burling will miss this weekend's round in Sydney for the birth of his first child, with veteran Nathan Outridge to take over behind the wheel. Burling will return for next month's round in Littleton. Australian Olympic equestrian Shane Rose has been suspended from competition for wearing a mankini during a show jumping event. Equestrian Australia says concerns were raised about the 50-year-old's attire during a Sydney event where competitors were encouraged to wear fancy dress. Rose is stunned by the reaction.
Thought I was just having a bit of fun in a dress-up competition, and certainly things have gone a bit crazy.
That's the news.
A US aid package for Ukraine is blocked by Congress.
Every week that aid doesn't get to the Ukrainians, more of them die, more ground is given up, and they're on the back foot.
The government says Labor left a mess.
The turnaround job we need to do is going to be a big one.
But Labor says the government is scrambling.
They're trying to create a scenario in which they can break the promises that they made.
Politics at home and abroad. Morning Report, weekdays from 6 until 9 on RNZ National.
You are on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel, generally fine today. Scattered showers tomorrow, clearing south of Auckland in the afternoon. Waitomo to Kapiti, including the central high country. Cloudy periods and a few showers, clearing to fine tomorrow morning. Bay of Plenty, also Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine today. Showers tomorrow, more frequent in the afternoon and evening. Wadadapa and Wellington, also Marlborough and Nelson, mainly fine. A few showers tomorrow morning. Bulla and Westland, also Canterbury and Otago, except Clutha, occasional rain or showers, clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. Severe northwest gales in exposed parts of Canterbury easing this evening. Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, showers with possible hail, easing early tomorrow, then clearing to fine weather. The odd shower about the south coast again tomorrow evening. Rekohu, Chatham Islands, fine spells today. Showers tomorrow, some possibly heavy. It is coming up to 8 minutes past 5. I will have traffic news and headlines for you at 20 past 5.
Nā mihi iwi, tēnā koutou katoa, no mai haere mai, ki Checkpoint I tēnei rā, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Fragile is the state of the nation, according to the Prime Minister. In a speech, Christopher Luxon said the new government's uncovered some, quote, nasty surprises about Aotearoa's financial position. He listed kāinga orders, balance sheet, transport budget shortfalls and infrastructure debt as some of the challenges ahead. The PM repeatedly signalled tough choices are needed to get the country back on financial track, in what he describes as a big turnaround job. So what does that mean for the budget and tax relief? We're joined by accountant and tax specialist Terry Boucher. Kia ora, Terry.
Kia ora, Lisa.
The books were opened before the election, so are any of these financial fishhooks that the Prime Minister has listed, are any of them really surprises?
Not really. The scale of them has been magnified. I think with the transport questionnaire, they've just put in the wish list beyond the 4 years. Budgets are done on a 4-year cycle. They project what the expenses are for this year and the next 4 years, and that's generally when people are talking about budgets and dollars, etc. That's the period they're referring to. But this $200 billion amount doesn't actually have a set timeline. It includes projects such as the possible second crossing of Auckland Harbour, which is $48 billion, but that's just basically uncosted properly.
So, Terry, in preparing their budget and campaigning on certain policies, this government should have been aware of the fiscal situation?
Well, yes, and that's the whole idea behind the pre-election economic fiscal update. We have an extremely open set of public books. It's an amazing amount of detail you can dig around and find. With the budget and the half-yearly economic forecast and the pre-fill. The books are open to a great degree. So transparency is there. You have to know where you're looking, but that's their job.
So when the Prime Minister talks about tough choices, things being worse than what was anticipated and difficult choices ahead, what signals do you think that's sending in terms of the budget that we should expect?
Well, I think it's signalling perhaps that cuts are going to have to be deeper than they've initially programmed. They've talked about taking $7.5 billion out already. But seem to be indicating that in order to deliver the tax relief, which is as part of the election promises, they may have to make other cuts, and they've signalled what they're going to do with beneficiaries. But if you read Treasury's briefing to incoming minister for the finance minister, they say there's a substantial fiscal consolidation required, and they talk about needing perhaps to raise taxes or look at alternative tax, expanding the tax base to meet the demands, because they quote, long-term pressures such as demographics and climate change are being felt now.
So,
if
Terry,
you live in Auckland,
on that point then, you talk about the prospect of deeper cuts. Could there be shallower cuts and smaller tax cuts, or none at all, to balance the books?
That's certainly one possibility. That's certainly one possibility. The tax cuts position is something governments have got themselves into a mess. There's this question, what we call fiscal drag or bracket creep, where salaries increase thanks to wage inflation, and earners cross a tax threshold and their tax rate increases shot on their next dollar. So the key point at the moment is $48,000, where below that the tax rate is 17.5%, above it it's 30%. And fiscal drag, those thresholds have not been changed since October 2010, so they're well overdue. And fiscal drag is a sneaky way governments have been raising taxes. In the half-year economic fiscal update, they estimate fiscal drag is worth $4.5 billion over the next 4.5 years.
So it is National's intention to adjust those brackets, but in its coalition agreement, it only makes a commitment to do that in this year. Can we afford to do that? And should it be regularly programmed in bracket creep changes?
I'll answer the second one. I think bracket creep changes should be programmed in and inflation adjusted, because that's transparent. You don't get a scenario where governments are quietly raking in extra money and putting extreme pressure on a small group of people. Actually, it's the lowest income earners that suffer highest under bracket creep. So I think that should be programmed in. As I said, it's 14 years since that's been done. So I think they have to do something if they want to meet their commitments.
Appreciate your time, Terry. That is Terry Boucher, who is an accountant and tax specialist. 13 minutes after 5. Kia amo tonomai. Do stay with us. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. And interested in your thoughts on that one, 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. If we're a fragile nation at the moment, can we still afford those tax cuts? The government's crackdown on beneficiaries has started. MSD has officially been instructed to actively use all levers available to encourage people off the benefit and into work, and that includes sanctions. In a letter outlining her expectations, Minister Louise Upston says a consequence of not fully applying the existing sanctions regime is that remaining on the benefit has become the rational choice for too many people. And she expects the number of sanctions to be specifically tracked and reported to her. From June, MSD will begin check-ins for work-ready job seekers who have been on a benefit for 6 months to make sure they are doing all they should to find work. Well, joining us now is the Minister for Social Development, Louise Upston. Kia ora, Minister.
Hello, Lisa.
So what's changing under your regime?
Well, what we do want to do is make sure that job seekers are taking the steps they need to. They have obligations when they are on the job seeker benefit. We expect they're taking those steps and that there's consequences when they don't. So this is the approach that we want to take. So I've set my expectations with the Ministry of Social Development that the existing graduated sanction regime will be utilised.
So you described the last government's approach as to using sanctions as sparingly and as a last resort. So what words would you describe to your approach?
Well, I think we should just use the levers that we have to support more people off job seeker benefit and into work. I want to see them with a life of opportunity that comes from work.
So it's a crackdown, is it?
No, it's a reset. There are sanctions available when people don't play their bit, don't help themselves to find a job. And we just want to make it really clear there's practical things they need to do. to be looking for a job, having a CV, applying for jobs, turning up to job interviews, and that there'll be consequences if they don't take those steps.
Right, you talk about consequences for those who repeatedly fail to comply with their work obligations. So how many strikes will they get?
Well, there's already a graduated scheme. At this stage, all I'm doing is just asking Work and Income to utilise the existing graduated scheme. So that will mean a job seeker has obligations. If they don't fulfil those obligations, they may get a reduction in their benefit. The next step would be a suspension or finally a cancellation. But there are warnings along the way, and what we do know is that the threat of a consequence is often what stirs people into action and gets them to comply again and take those necessary steps to find a job.
So you cite 2017 statistics and say there were 60,000 sanctions thereabout, and it nosedived to 25,000 in 2023. I mean, what's your target? How many people do you anticipate would be sanctioned if they were used as frequently as you would like?
Well, I will have a target on the number of people we move off the job seeker benefit. That's what my focus is, and I will be looking at as many steps as possible, like the 6-monthly check-in, to support people off welfare and into work. And I think that's only fair to low and middle income taxpayers who are funding the welfare system, that they know that those who are on the job seeker benefit are taking the steps they need to help themselves find work. Right, so about 110,000 people are work ready on the job seekers benefit. What's your target? What percentage reduction are you going to aim for? We will have those targets, and they will be published in the coming weeks. Give me a ballpark. Are you wanting a 10% reduction, 20%, 50%? I'm not going to give you those numbers today, but we will have. I will have a firm target for reducing the number of people on job seeker benefit. I want to see more people in work. The best way to reduce hardship for people and their children is to be in work. So I will be absolutely focused on reducing the number of people on the job seeker benefit. So should beneficiaries be forced to take any job, any work that is available to them? So part of the process of them being ready for work and applying for work is that it needs to be suitable. It needs to be suitable to their skills and ability. But there are jobs out there. We want to see more Kiwis in work, and I want to, very clearly focus on reducing the number of people on job seeker benefit. Tax evasion costs us as well. Are you going to put the same energy as a government into tracking down tax evaders? This focus is on those who are on the job seeker benefit, taking steps that they need to take to help themselves find work. At the same time, with this additional check-in with Work and Income, make sure that people are getting the support and assistance they need. I fully understand that for some people they have significant challenges in finding work, and we want to make sure they get the support they need. Thank you for joining us, Minister. That is the Social Development Minister, Louise Upston. Let us know your thoughts on that, 2101 on text. Tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, the email address checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. The government has officially instructed MSD to use all levers, including sanctions. Another scary night for Canterbury residents who had to flee their homes as fire tore through the Waikari Valley. Flames ripped through about 300 hectares of land overnight, threatening homes and property and sending flames flaring high into the night. With the fire now declared contained, residents have been allowed to return to their homes as firefighters shift their focus to dampening down hotspots. And all residents but one have also returned to their homes in Christchurch's Port Hills, where another major fire is still burning 5 days after it started. Neva Chittick reports.
Waikari local Sally Thompson got a call from a local fireman last night telling her to prepare to evacuate. Shortly before midnight, a police officer turned up on her doorstep and said it was time to go.
We had readied a couple of bags and some precious photos and things and got them in 4 different vehicles with the farm dog, and son's a shearer, so we got his grinder and all his shearing gear and that, and came down to Waipara. And I actually am a chronic snorer, so my husband and I slept. Well, we didn't actually sleep, but we stayed in the car, in the truck outside.
It's not her first brush with fire.
We had one down here a couple of weeks ago in Waipara, And the young couple one of the properties that was directly affected by that, are good friends of ours, and I have said to them that we sleep with our windows open at this time of the year, just so we can smell something, hopefully. But then someone pointed out to me, apparently you don't smell smoke if you're asleep.
There was deja vu for Les Wynn Slade as he realised he needed to leave his home again.
We grabbed the animals and we got a cat and a dog and had to catch them and bring them in as well. But yeah, stressful night. It's a bit of a worry because way back in 1989 me and the wife had an experience like our house burned down and we lost animals in the fire. So it was a bit traumatic for us.
He then watched the flames from his motorhome window in Waikari Domain before heading to the evacuation centre in Waipara.
We're looking out the window and you could see the sky light up with the flames. It was quite high. It was sort of coming towards us and we were a little bit nervous, but it was some distance away. But you could see it sort of diminish, go up and down, and it was quite strong. And you could see it was pretty mean.
This afternoon, Fire and Emergencies Incident Controller Des Irving told residents the fire had been contained.
Containment means that you can go home tonight, right? But you still have to be vigilant because there's still a live fire burning heading towards Glenmark Drive, but it's still some kilometres away. We're going to be here for a few days yet.
Meanwhile, on Christchurch's Port Hills, 40 hotspots are still burning. FENZ controller for that incident, Steve Kennedy, says more than 100 firefighters are still working to put them out 5 days on.
A lot of the hotspots are actually inside what we call the burnt out area. So even if it came into flame with a lot of them, it's not going to go anywhere because it's already burnt around it. So a lot of the hot spots it's down underground, and sometimes they don't look like much until they start digging into them.
The flames have claimed a local student radio station's entire transmitter shed on Marley's Hill, reducing it to ash. RDU Program Director Liam Donnelly says they temporarily lost broadcast for a few hours before the backup jumped to life. He says the public support has been heartwarming.
Even just actually offering equipment. This is broadcasting equipment. It's not simple, cheap stuff, but public have just been so lovely to us. I'm still shocked. I've never seen an outpouring of love like this, so I'm super appreciative.
So some good news for the moment, but Canterbury's dry conditions and total fire ban are not set to ease anytime soon.
It is 22 minutes after 5 and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, we would love your feedback on anything you've heard on the programme this evening. Do get in touch. The Prime Minister has described the state of the nation as fragile. So do you reckon we can still afford tax cuts or not? Let us know your thoughts on that. And also, officially, the crackdown on beneficiaries is underway. MSD has received a letter from the Minister asking them to use sanctions and all levers available to get people off the benefit. Let us know your thoughts on those things. It is time for the headlines now. Ko Evi Ano Tēnei.
People evacuated from North Canterbury's Waikari Valley will be allowed to return home tonight after firefighters contained a blaze that's ripped through 300 hectares since yesterday. But Fire and Emergency warns those residents that they should be prepared to get out again at a moment's notice. Meanwhile, emergency services in Christchurch are asking people to avoid the Port Hills for at least another week as work continues to extinguish the wildfire that broke out last Wednesday. Police Forward Commander Senior Sergeant Roy Apley says cordons remain in place to stop disaster tourists from disrupting firefighting operations. The government is getting tough on beneficiaries who aren't looking for work, telling MSD to encourage people off its books. The Minister for Social Development, Louise Upston, told Checkpoint there are sanctions already available and she expects them to be used. She wouldn't say what target the government was aiming for. The rat-plagued Countdown Dunedin South supermarket is to stay closed until at least Thursday after another rat was caught overnight. The Ministry for Primary Industries is also investigating after more than 20 rats were caught before parent company Woolworths closed the store. And an electrical fire in the basement of the Treasury building in Wellington has closed a small section of the terrace. A Treasury spokesperson says staff were evacuated at about 4 o'clock. Police are asking drivers to avoid the area. Those other headlines. Looking at traffic in Wellington, State Highway 1 heading south at the Glenside off-ramp remains closed because of a crash. Please consider using an alternative route. Our next traffic news and headlines are at 20 to 6.
Thank you, Evie. The football Ferns are just one win away from the Olympics. It's a simple equation facing New Zealand in Apia today. Beat the Solomon Islands and qualify for Paris. Well, joining me is sports reporter Jonty Dine. OK, Jonty, the game's underway, yeah?
Yes, we kicked off about 20 minutes ago, and it took just 12 minutes for Hannah Wilkinson to set up Jackie Hand to score and give the Ferns a 1-0 lead. And they're looking very sharp early on, so some good signs. Of course, this is the final of the Oceania Olympic qualifiers. As you mentioned, the path to Paris ends here, win, and they are in. And of course, the Ferns are heavy favourites for this one. They've been dominant throughout this tournament, scoring 21 goals, conceding just the one, with wins over Tonga, Samoa, Vanuatu and Fiji. But obviously, that'll all mean nothing if they can't get past the Solomon Islands. And are now playing in her 100th game today, Ferns defender Rebecca Stott. She says they've been implementing some pretty unique techniques in order to cope with the heat and humidity in Apia.
We have ice slushies with the Gatorade before a game to cool our internal temperature, I guess. We have ice vests to wear before the game and at halftime just to cool us down, ice towels, things like that, getting in the right things we need supplement-wise and food, I guess. So, yeah, it's been really helpful.
So they've been getting a bit creative. They do get a bit of a reprieve today from the sun. It's cloudy overhead, but still 88% humidity, so a huge challenge ahead.
Absolutely. OK, so who's the Aussie batsman who's taking a swing at Kiwi crowd?
Well, none other than David Warner, of course. He's taken some shots at New Zealand cricket fans for abusing him and his teammates during his last full tour in 2016. Now, at the time, he said the abuse was taking aim at players' families, and he said he would have been horrified had his daughters been in the crowd at the time. Dave Warner, he's one of those players that Kiwi fans love to hate. I think the likes of Quade Cooper, George Gregan and Willie Mason. But of course there's a big difference between a bit of sideline banter and straight up abuse. And Warner said last time he was here, things just got way too personal.
The crowd, yeah, they got personal, but if they have to get personal, that's their character. I just go about my business, but that's upon each individual. If that's what they feel like they have to do, then so be it. If you want to pay your money to come and abuse people, then you have to go back and lay in your own bed. We get to play the game of cricket that we love, enjoy, and try and put bums on seats to keep the game going.
So a bit scathing there from Warner, and the online reaction, it's been mixed as you expect. Some saying it's a bit rich considering Warner's sledging history, and others, of course, calling it hypocritical considering how vicious the Australian crowds can be. But it wasn't all negative from Warner today. He did say he loves coming to New Zealand and he wants more frequent tours. Trans-Tasman fixtures, they were a staple on the calendar prior to the explosion of T20, and it's now been 6 years since they last played here. So a long-awaited return for Australia, and hopefully the fans won't spoil the party.
Thank you, Jonty. That is sports reporter Jonty Dine there. It's an itsy bitsy teeny weeny mankini, and it's landed atop Australian Equestrian before a disciplinary tribunal and left a question mark over whether he'll be able to compete in a vital Olympic qualifying event in New Zealand. Show jumping Olympic medalist Shane Rose has been suspended for wearing the mankini in a fancy dress show jumping competition at Wallaby Hill near Sydney at the weekend. If it needs any explanation, a mankini is a cross between a wafer-thin unitard and a sort of scanty lycra bathing suit cut in a really deep V at the front with crotch coverage, and the reverse view is a string thong. Borat made it famous. Stop sniggering, Jonty. Competitors rode out in an array of costumes, but it seems that someone took exception to Rose's attire. Now, Shane Rose told me he is now preparing to defend himself and the mankini at an Equestrian Australia hearing.
Basically, somebody made a complaint. Because they've made a complaint, a formal complaint, EA have to, our Equestrian Federation, have to do a review, an internal review. So so that's in process at the moment. So I've handed in a statement of events. They'll put a panel together that will see if I've actually got a case to answer or not. But part of that process means that I'm stood down whilst that process is happening.
And what does that mean in practical terms, Shane? No events?
I can't compete until I get a resolution, which I'm hopeful will be in coming days.
So you basically have to go before a panel and defend the mankini?
Yeah, I believe so. I don't know exactly how the process goes, but yeah, something along those lines. Or potentially they may look at the evidence and say it's fine, but I don't know yet what that result is going to be.
Can you please describe said costume to our listeners?
So I wore a few different costumes on the day. It was a fancy dress event. So I've got a very good friend of mine who's our team vet, is Greek, and he's a hairy man, and he's worn a mankini, and I asked him if I could impersonate him, and I did. And I wore quite a hairy suit and a mankini, and then I thought if I was going to go as him, I must back it up and go as myself. So I did. The mankini is sort of like a pair of ladies' swimwear that goes up in a V shape up over your shoulders and back down. There's not a lot of material to it, to be fair, and definitely not a very comfortable piece of equipment.
So it's like about as thick as a toothpick looking at the pictures, right? So
a thick toothpick.
Okay.
But yeah, no, there's not a lot of material.
Right. I mean, excuse this, but we need to have our facts here. So were your butt cheeks exposed?
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
And what
butt
about
cheeks were exposed?
What about the front?
The front was fairly well covered. I put some extra protection, so to speak, down there, and made sure I taped on quite extensively, so there was no chance of any stray luggage. That was all taken care of. So just basically a bit of butt cheek hanging out the back.
And a makeshift sporran at the front, Shane?
Yes,
Okay.
Pretty much.
So you are a show jumper. So was this in the show jumping event? Did you have to get out of the saddle? You see where I'm going with this?
Yeah. No, look, I think probably best not viewed from directly behind, but I was trying to be as thoughtful as I could and staying as low to the saddle as I could. But that we were jumping jumps, correct.
So, to be blunt, at no time, to your knowledge, were your genitals exposed during this event?
Oh, definitely not. No, that's not wasn't possible.
But someone's become offended by it?
Apparently so. Yes, it's a sad world we live in, but a world we live in all the same.
On a serious note, you are a serious competitor. You are a great Olympic hope for Australia. Are you concerned that this is going to have an effect on your Olympic campaign?
Oh, there's always a concern. Absolutely. Until there's an outcome and I know what the outcome is. I've got a major part. I'm coming to New Zealand in 2.5 weeks, 3 weeks. I'll be in New Zealand in a fortnight, hopefully, to compete as my final qualifying event for the Olympic Games. So if I miss that will be a massive problem for my campaign. Like I've planned this specifically to do these events for certain reasons, and this is a massive part of it. So if I can't do that, then I'll have to rethink my whole program.
And that is Olympic medalist, Australian equestrian and mankini wearer, Shane Rose. Now, Checkpoint approached Equestrian Australia for comment and was sent a reply from the Australian Sports Commission. It said no one's available to speak to the media while the investigation is underway. Quick bit of your feedback on other topics. On the subject of the crackdown on beneficiaries, this person says, I sincerely hope the current government applies the same rigour to citizens' responsibilities to honour their tax obligations as they do to job seeker beneficiaries' obligations to find work. On the flip side of the coin, this listener says, finally, a government with a backbone. Do keep your feedback coming. Text us on 2101 or you can tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. It is 26 minutes away from 6. Kia mau tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. It is, of course, time for the business news. Ko taku hoa e nai ko Nona Peltier. Nona is with me in the studio. Okay, we're in a little bit of a reporting.
We're in the
scoop.
reporting season, that's right. And I have to tell you, there's good, very good, bad, very bad, and potentially ugly to tell you about.
Okay, 2 big listed companies have given they've sounded the warning bell, haven't they?
Yeah, okay, let's start with the bad then. Okay, so we've got Ryman Healthcare, Their share price fell 11.5% today on their report that their sales numbers are behind because people don't want to move into half-finished building or partially finished buildings. And not only that, their margins are also down. So that's not great. So that's sales, letting them down there. Air New Zealand also facing some headwinds, as you would say. Yeah, they're warning of a full-year earnings blowout there for the year ending. They're saying that their profit, underlying profit, is supposed to be somewhere between 200 and 240 million, and that compares with last year's 585 million. Market didn't really like that, so it's down about 2/3%. And then let's move into maybe the good. The good is Contact. They did pretty well today with their financial report. Pretty strong compared with the loss they made in the first half the year earlier. So the market was pretty happy with them at $153.5 million with a reasonably good outlook. They're saying that prices for consumer power is likely to increase over time, mostly because of new regulations for lines companies. That's going to add to the bottom line for what consumers have to pay for power. The market was pretty happy with Contact. It rose 1/3%, but really the big winner of the day would have to have been A2 Milk with a 14% increase in its share price because their sales to China are doing quite well. They're also expecting low to medium growth in the years ahead for their business. So the market was satisfied that they have been rewarded. And the potentially ugly, is Fletcher Building in the news again, this time with the threat of a ratings downgrade in the wake of their recent announcements. So that's saying that the company there is going to be working very hard to convince the ratings agency otherwise. And anyways, their share price fell 1.1%. Overall, the top 50 index finished down 0.6%. Given all of that, it's not really a surprise. And that was a 71-point drop to 11,653. The New Zealand dollar is doing a little bit better today. 61.4 US cents, 93.6 Australian, and 48.7 British pence. And there you go. That's what I got for you.
Thank you, Nona. Ka kite. That was Nona Peltier with Business News. Let's get to some more of your feedback. It's coming in pretty thick and fast, actually, on New Zealand's fragility and our finances. This person says National's hyperbolic nonsense is all about laying the groundwork for much deeper cuts they always wanted to make but can't justify without manufacturing a crisis. Straight from the Tory handbook, that person says. Another listener reckons, for goodness sake, tax the rich. This one too, John Key's crackdown on beneficiaries gave us our first ever beggars on the streets. Now the new national government's beneficiary policy will presumably increase our street residents. On the subject of benefit sanctions, how does the Minister aim to get more beneficiaries in to work, fit with Rob Orr's statement that keeping inflation to target means more unemployment? Good question. Feedback 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. If you're a parent of a school-aged child, it could be the time of year again when the school sends home a request for payment. It might look very official with invoice numbers, a column for GST and due dates, but lots of these charges are actually classified as donations. With us is in-depth reporter Farah Hancock to explain what's a compulsory payment and what is considered a donation. Tell us, can all schools ask for a donation?
Not all schools. So there is a new government scheme that started in 2020, and that gives schools $150 per student if they agree not to ask for donations for anything but a school camp. And most schools have signed up to this. It's available to the lower decile schools.
So if you've got a couple of school invoices that have come home from school that is not part of the government scheme, can you run down a few things that are on them, and is it clear-cut what's a donation and what's not?
It's not that clear-cut. So you'll see a school donation. Obviously, that is what it looks like. It's a school donation. You can pay all of it, part of it, none of it. It's up to you. And then there might be things like camps, day trips, excursions, curriculum materials. Now, those might be a donation and they might not. If it's anything to do with delivering the school curriculum, the school can't force you to pay for it. It's technically a donation. But if it's something extracurricular, like a school trip that's a sports team weekend activity, then that might be something that you pay for to go on outside of the school curriculum, so you might need to pay that.
Sounds like there's a bit of detective work to determine what your obligations are.
There might be a little bit. You may need to talk to your school to find out exactly what is a donation and what's not. But schooling is free, the curriculum, for state schools in New Zealand. So if it's part of the curriculum, then it should be free and they can only ask a donation for it.
Are there clear expectations on, what you should pay and what you shouldn't?
It's a little bit confusing. There is one big exception to the is it a donation or is it not a donation, and that is state integrated schools. They might ask for attendance dues, and you'll quite often see Catholic schools ask for that, and that is compulsory. You need to pay.
So that's
that one.
in essence your fee for going to that school. It's attendance dues.
Attendance dues generally covers property for Catholic schools because I think they lease the property from.
Okay.
Yeah, that's a little trickier.
All right then. And what happens if you don't pay a donation? Can your child be excluded from events?
They can't be excluded from anything related to the curriculum. The school has to deliver the curriculum. The school can't withhold a school report or a certificate, and they can't stop your kid from going to the school ball or getting the school magazine. You'll have to pay for the ball ticket or the school magazine, but if you don't pay your donation, you can't be blocked from going to those things or getting those things.
I'm just wondering, how are parents supposed to determine what trips are part of delivery of school curriculum? If it comes on an invoice, how do you make that determination?
I think it's really tricky. So I think it's one thing that parents should be getting in touch with their school and going, is this part of the curriculum? And then making a decision from there whether they can pay all of it or pay part of it or not pay it if they've got other priorities at the time.
Thanks, Farah. That's Farah Hancock there on school donations. And we're really interested in your thoughts on this one. Have you received a bill? Do you feel like you have any choice but to pay? What happens if you don't? How much pressure is coming on? And do check out more of Farah's detailed analysis of school donations. And you can find that at rnz.co.nz/in-depth. 2101 on text to get in touch about school donations, or you can email us checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is 17 minutes away from 6. You're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. Homai o whakaaro, send us your feedback on anything you've heard on the program, whether it's school donations, tax cuts or a crackdown on beneficiaries. 2101 on text, tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, email checkpoint@rnz.co.nz. It is time to go to Evie and the headlines. Anaya Evie, mena pitipiti kōrero.
The Prime Minister says ramping up benefit sanctions won't affect the vast majority of people who are meeting their obligations on the job seeker benefit. The government has told the Ministry of Social Development to make better use of the existing benefit sanctions system. It's also asked the agency to complete work check-ins with beneficiaries considered ready for employment after 26 weeks. Meanwhile, Christopher Luxon isn't ruling out the possibility of further sanctions against Russia after the death of Alexei Navalny. Mr. Navalny, a prominent critic of President Vladimir Putin, died in a Siberian penal colony at the weekend. The Prime Minister says his view is that Mr. Putin is accountable. Hatohone St John maintains patients won't suffer with its cost-cutting measures as it tries to plug a $5.5 million hole. The sector's biggest union, the Ambulance Association, warns patients could die as a result of roster gaps when crews call in sick or go on leave. The number of people reported to have been killed in an ambush in Papua New Guinea's remote highlands region has risen to 64. A National Police spokesperson told the BBC the victims were shot dead during a tribal dispute over the weekend. In the US, a woman is recovering in a Washington hospital after a cougar attacked her and 4 other cyclists. The group encountered the big cat on a trail east of Seattle. And a fire in the basement of the Treasury building in Wellington is now out and a closed section of the terrace is now open. Those are the headlines. Looking at traffic, still in Wellington, State Highway 1 heading south, Glenside off-ramp is still closed because of a crash on a local road there. Please consider using an alternative route. Our next news and weather are at 6.
Ngā mihi, Evie. Paramedics are warning patients could die if Hatohone St John goes ahead with plans to take ambulances off the road to avoid paying staff to cover for sick colleagues. The emergency ambulance provider to 90% of New Zealanders insists the cost-cutting moves won't compromise patient care, but admits some non-urgent cases will have to wait longer. Ruth Hill reports.
It's the sound you never want to need to hear, but when you're anxiously waiting for an ambulance, that siren is the most comforting sound in the world. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, Hatohone St John's ambulances attend to nearly 390,000 emergencies and take more than 460,000 people to hospital every year. However, on Friday, management informed staff that to cut costs, the service is limiting recalls. That's when backup crew are called in to cover for colleagues off sick or on holiday. The sector's biggest union, the Ambulance Association, says that's putting lives at risk. Its National Secretary, Mark Quinn, has fielded calls from Taranaki and Southland to say frontline services are already affected.
Yesterday, because of this measure, they are standing trucks down.
He says even when there's normal staffing, some patients are waiting up to 6 hours for an ambulance, while so-called ramping is still endemic in some regions. That's when ambulance crews are parked up at hospitals for hours, looking after critically ill patients because emergency departments are too busy to take them.
So you start throwing it all into the mix, you're starting to get a Swiss cheese effect, that all the holes going to line up and there will be death because nobody will be available.
Hatohone St John Deputy Chief Executive Dan Ows, who heads ambulance operations, insists taking some ambulances off the road at times won't affect the quality of patient care overall.
There may be some delays in getting to those patients with non-life-threatening emergencies, and non-life-threatening emergencies would be things like a peripheral injury to a hand. There may be some delays for those patients, but for emergencies we're expecting there will be minimal to no delay at all.
Dan Ows says St John is in a good position to do this because it's got 207 additional staff on the road compared with a year ago, and response times have improved dramatically. He says ramping is down from a peak of 1,200 hours a week during winter to 700 hours a week currently. Hatohone St John is $5.5 million in the red for this financial year and is looking at a number of cost-saving measures across the board, including delaying some longer-term projects and slashing non-essential travel. Mark Quinn from the Ambulance Association says St John's financial woes have also put the brakes on the current pay talks with the union. Management initially agreed to a 6% pay rise for this year, subject to approval by Health New Zealand Te Whatu Ora.
Now they've come back and said, no, we've got nothing, we can't give you the 6%, we've got nothing. We can't even put 1% on the table, can't put even $1 on the table. So they're blaming Te Whatu Ora and Te Whatu Ora are blaming St John.
No one from Te Whatu Ora was available for interview, but in a joint statement with ACC, it says Hatohone St John is responsible for operational matters, including decisions that impact its service costs. A spokesperson notes Hatohone St John and Wellington Free Ambulance currently receive about $380 million a year from the government, an increase of 32% in the last 2 years. Dan Ows from St John says the service continues to have constructive talks with unions, and funding levels and ensuring staff are paid to a competitive level remains an everyday conversation with its funders.
It is 12 minutes away from 6. Kia amo tonu mai. You're listening to Checkpoint on RNZ National. The sole survivor of last year's alleged poisonous mushroom meal in Victoria has spoken publicly for the first time since his ordeal. Pastor Ian Wilkinson, along with his wife Heather, her sister-in-law Gail Patterson and brother-in-law Don Patterson, ate the poisoned meal. The other 3 all died, while Mr Wilkinson spent months recovering in hospital. Speaking to his Karambura Baptist Church congregation, Mr Wilkinson cried as he spoke of his late wife.
And yesterday was our 45th wedding anniversary. So it's been a pretty big week. Let me encourage you to keep on going.
Ian Wilkinson also encouraged others to have faith.
The way is sometimes hard, but God is good. He is with us. He promised never to leave or forsake us. And I can say that is true.
His nephew's estranged wife, Erin Patterson, was in November charged for the alleged murders and 5 counts of attempted murder. The attempted murder charges relate to Mr Wilkinson's alleged prior poisoning attempts by Patterson on her husband Simon's life. She'll reappear in court in May. Let's get to some more of your feedback now on the issue of school donations. This listener says, my child goes to school in Tauranga. Definitely no school magazine if you can't or don't pay the donation. It punishes the child, that listener says. Parents can get back tax for a school donation, another one says. There are lots of activities that schools do that add that touch of magic and engagement for students that are related to the curriculum but are not must-dos. Should schools just stop doing anything exciting for students? Schools cannot afford to take children on fun events and then have parents not pay. Schools do not have extra money, says Rebecca. At high school, costs related to the curriculum should be listed in a curriculum guide that parents should read before a student decides their subjects. And this from another listener, I got sent home with red notices when I was 12 because my parents hadn't paid the school donation and it was overdue. The different colour made it obvious what it was, so I was essentially shamed in front of my classmates. On the subject of the mankini, this is Shane Rose, the equestrian, who wore it at, well, the riders were encouraged to wear fancy dress at a competition near Sydney at the weekend. He's been suspended for the mankini. This listener says he deserves a medal. Imagine riding a whole round in that. I should point out he did put a towel between his backside and the saddle, which helped him with any issues around, contact with leather. Another says Shane should be commended for ultimately being a show jumper worthy of the name. And someone else says, was there a dress code? What about the horsey riders should wear? No code, then it is open to the rider, surely, says Patsy. Well, Patsy, I did ask him about that, and he said there were no guidelines given, and it was just encouraged that you wore fancy dress. He actually had 3 costumes. Mankini was only one of them, and it appears that the other 2 costumes didn't attract any near the attention that one did. 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ, or checkpoint at rnz.co.nz is our email address if you want to join the conversation on any of those topics. A call tonight for day trampers at Aotearoa's most popular national parks to pay their way in the wake of a poo pile-up that's seen DOC close the track to some people. The toilets on the Mueller Hut route on Aoraki Mount Cook are almost at capacity, with DOC now urging day trippers to stay away. People who have booked the hut are still welcome. Now, one of the country's most experienced mountain guides says more people need to pay to access popular tracks to help pay for facilities like loos. Charlie Hobbs has been guiding in the area for 30 years and joins us now. Charlie, this sounds like it's a bit of a dirty problem. What do you think about it?
Well, yeah, it certainly puts people in the poo, doesn't it?
Certainly
so
does.
Yeah, look, actually it's over 30 years, by the way, so we've been guiding up there a long time, and Mary and I own the Old Mountaineers Cafe, so we see a lot of people, and there are a lot of people going up the Hooker Valley and the Mueller Ridge. There's so many, thousands of people coming in there every day, and it's for free. And a lot of these people that are coming in are not coming into the village and using the amenities. They're coming in, driving out. Now, when you go to national parks in other lands and other countries, people don't mind paying for the service, and it helps, it helps the local organisations or, the DOC organisations pay the way, help pay the fees. And it's quite sensible, really, isn't it?
So, Charlie, yeah, so if you want a spot in the hut, you pay. If you're a day tripper on the track, you don't pay anything. So you think that those day trippers should be charged some kind of fee to contribute to the upkeep of facilities like the toilets?
Absolutely. It costs a lot of money to upkeep the tracks at Aoraki Mount Cook. Just emptying the loos. I mean, it's just not the Mueller loos. There are loos on the Hooker track as well, and there's more than one. There's a whole raft of them.
So how do you reckon you could levy that charge, Charlie? What would be the practical way to do it?
Well, with overseas visitors, I mean, you can either pay at an entry gate or, the government have got a statutory law that says national parks are free. Well, we know the government can change laws because they've been doing it over the last few years, so change that one. Or there could be a parking fee. I mean, there are just heaps of cars and vehicles coming in. And there would be, from what I can see, there are a lot of illegal small bus groups coming in that don't have concessions. Now, every bus that comes in, could have up to 40 people. The small buses have, 12 to 15, 16 people. And there are numerous ones coming in. They need to be checked. And
so do you think it should be the overseas visitors that pay and still keep it free to residents and citizens?
Absolutely.
At the moment, is there any way that you can actually close it off to some day walkers? Or, when Doc is saying, hey, we need to ease the pressure on these facilities, so we'd prefer it if you were a day tripper and stayed away. Is there really any way to police it at the moment?
Look, we don't want to close it off to people because it's an amazing national park and whatever. But I think if people come in, they've got to understand that there is value to it. And it's not just a case of just piling in by the thousands and doing it for free. Look.
Do you have an idea?
Charging them won't put them off coming.
Do you have an idea in your head, Charlie, about what is the sweet spot to charge people to walk the track for a day trip? What do you reckon's reasonable?
$10, $10. People would pay it gladly entering the national park. $20. Would you? I would. When I go to America, when I've been to the USA or Australia, I was very happy to pay $20 to enter Yosemite National Park or Kosciuszko National Park. Because I knew that if I went in there were going to be facilities that were looked after. Look, poor Doc at Mount Cook, they're overrun. They've got budget cuts. They're getting no money, and there's no income for them to look after these tracks and whatever. The toilet paper bill itself is massive. They go through crates and crates of toilet paper.
Well, really appreciate your thoughts, Charlie. Thank you for your time. That is Charlie Hobbs, who's been guiding for more than 30 years in the area. And this is the issue with the Mueller track and toilets almost full. He's reckoning a charge, quite cheap. What's the number he came up with? $10 or something similar. Let us know your thoughts, 2101 on text or tweet us at Checkpoint RNZ. Now, the Department of Conservation has sent us a statement saying the track will reopen to day hikers on Wednesday, dependent on weather conditions. It says the Aoraki operations team were scheduled to empty the toilets at Mueller Hut later this week, and they simply filled up faster than expected. So really interested in your thoughts on that. Do get in touch, and let's get to some of your other feedback. On St John's, this person says, so no government funding for ambulances? Incredible. We can do without a lot of things, but I do think that we need ambulances, this person says. St John's still in need of funding. I'd like to know, as others join me, what the cost of changing all their letterheads, etc., to include the hone hato wording. Why isn't the ambulance fully funded by the government? This person says, the same as FENS or police. Does the government not care about the injured people that need urgent assistance? On the subject of school donations, most schools are chronically underfunded, and school donations are incredibly important for enriching children's education experiences. If parents don't contribute, children will miss out. Point taken, but what if the parents can't afford? So 2101 on text. The debate shouldn't be about the donations or fees, this listener says, but about what our priorities are as a society. Chronic long-term multi-government underfunding of education like health and infrastructure requires schools to find additional funds to support what they do. There is nothing more important than quality education and childcare for the future of our society. So instead of debating whether it is a fee or a donation, let's pressure the government to adequately fund critical services. This listener says, tax cuts are not going to help. So do keep your feedback coming.
RNZ News at 6 o'clock. Tēnā tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. The Social Development Minister says the threat of sanctions for beneficiaries not trying hard enough to get work will spur them into action. The government has begun its welfare crackdown, directing officials to cut, suspend or cancel benefits if people don't meet their requirements. Sanctions have nosedived since 2017, despite the number of job seeker beneficiaries increasing by about 70,000. The Minister, Louise Upston, told Checkpoint people have to show they're applying for jobs and turning up for interviews.
If they don't fulfil those obligations, they may get a reduction in their benefit. The next step would be a suspension or finally cancellation. But there are warnings along the way, and what we do know is that the threat of a consequence is often what spurs people into action and gets them and take those necessary steps to find a job.
There will also be work check-ins with beneficiaries considered ready for employment after 26 weeks. The Prime Minister isn't ruling out the possibility of further sanctions against Russia following the death of Alexei Navalny. The prominent critic of President Vladimir Putin died at a Siberian penal colony over the weekend. Christopher Luxon says his view is that Mr Putin is accountable for Mr Navalny's death. New Zealand has applied a number of sanctions against Russia and Russian individuals since the outbreak of the war in Ukraine, although Russia's ambassador remains in New Zealand. Mr Luxon was asked whether more sanctions were on the table.
May well be, but we'll have a look at that. I mean, at the moment, MFAT, senior officials at MFAT will talk to the ambassador and raise and convey our concerns there.
Christopher Luxon says he's spoken regularly with Foreign Affairs Minister Winston Peters to discuss the situation. Fire and Emergency says it will take days for the fire in North Canterbury's Waikari Valley to extinguish, and residents should be prepared to evacuate again. Incident Commander Des Irving says the grass fire burnt through 300 hectares before it was contained this afternoon. About 40 evacuated residents were told they can return home this evening, but they need to stay vigilant in case of any flare-ups.
This is where the neighbour communication tree comes into play. So if you smell smoke, you see flame getting too close, contact your neighbours, dial 111 first. So that's, as a community, that's how we work together.
Des Irving says residents should have a bag packed with medication and any other essential items packed in their car so they're ready to evacuate again at a moment's notice. Hatohone St John maintains patients won't suffer from its cost-cutting measures, which include taking some ambulances off the road. The sector's biggest union, the Ambulance Association, warns patients could die as a result of roster gaps when crews call in sick or go on leave. The head of ambulance operations for Hatohone St John, Dan Ows, says the service has a deficit of $5.5 million this financial year, 2.5% of its operating budget. It's controlling costs by leaving some management positions vacant and delaying some projects.
So we're aiming to protect patients as much as feasible. And what I do want to ensure everyone is that if they dial 111, we will continue to respond as fast as we possibly can.
Dan Ows says St John continues to talk with Health New Zealand and ACC about funding levels. The number of people reported to have been killed in an ambush in Papua New Guinea's remote highlands region has reportedly risen to 64. RNZ Pacific's PNG correspondent Scott Wade says sources on the ground confirm that the weapons used were military grade rather than homemade. He says this is one of the worst killings he's seen in the last decade and was fuelled by a long-standing feud between different clans and aided by guns from the black market.
Israeli-made Galils, US-made M16s, SLRs. One bullet for an M16 is being sold for 30 kina, depending on the demand. So it's a very complex web of people who benefit from this tribal fighting as well.
Scott Wade says Papua New Guinea is a rich and complex country, and to say it's a violent place as a whole would be unfair. Israel has condemned remarks by Brazil's President Luis Inácio Lula da Silva for drawing a comparison between its actions in the Gaza Strip and Hitler's extermination of the Jews. Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says he is trivialising the Holocaust and attacking the right of Israel to self-defence. Here's the BBC's Mimi Swaby with more details.
This isn't the first time President Lula da Silva has thrown his hat into the ring with strong word choice. The outspoken left-wing president is pushing for Brazil to take a more present and progressive stance on the world stage. Lula's criticism of Israel's operations in Gaza are the latest in a chain of strong criticism from the region. Like many other leaders in Latin America, he is unafraid of making international controversy through bold statements.
And Contact Energy warns of significant power bill increases from April 2025 when new regulated line charges come in. The power company has reported a strong first half net profit ahead of what are expected to be large increases in regulated lines charges set by the Commerce Commission. Contact Chief Executive Mike Fuge says lines charges account for about 40% of total retail power bills, so a 10% increase in lines charges would be significant.
And then there is the energy inflation element on top of that. So it does translate to cost increases in the order of about 5 to 6% overall, just to stand still.
Inflation means power bills may begin to rise from this April. That's the news.
Pacific Waves.
Bringing Kiribati back into the forum.
Diving into the big stories of the region.
They are an instrument of the Constitution of Fiji.
And shining a light on issues affecting Pacific peoples in Aotearoa and around the world.
Being able to go out into different places and areas that share special connections with our community was really special.
We tell noa to Pacific leaders, newsmakers, experts and commentators, and bring you up-to-date coverage from our dedicated RNZ Pacific team and talented correspondents on the ground in the region. Pacific Waves at 8:15 weeknights on RNZ National.
You're back on Checkpoint next with Lisa Owen. Right now, the short forecast from Met Service to midnight Tuesday. Northland to Waikato, also Coromandel, generally fine today. Scattered showers tomorrow, clearing south of Auckland in the afternoon. Waitomo to Kapiti, including the central high country, cloudy periods and a few showers, clearing to fine tomorrow morning. Bay of Plenty, also Gisborne and Hawke's Bay, fine today. Showers tomorrow, more frequent in the afternoon and evening. Wairarapa and Wellington, also Marlborough and Nelson, mainly fine. A few showers tomorrow morning. Bulla and Westland, Canterbury and Otago, except for Clutha. Occasional rain or showers, clearing tomorrow morning and becoming fine. Severe northwest gales in exposed parts of Canterbury, easing this evening. Clutha, Southland and Fiordland, showers with possible hail, easing early tomorrow, then clearing to fine weather. The odd shower about the south coast again tomorrow evening. And for Kohu, Chatham Islands, fine spells today. Showers tomorrow, some possibly heavy. It is 8 minutes past 6. I will have news headlines for you at 6:30.
Kia ora rā iho, no mai hoki mai. This is Checkpoint, ko Lisa Owen tēnei. Support for the National Party is the same as it was election night, according to a new poll, but one of its support partners has taken a dive. The One News Varian poll shows National still holds 38% of the party vote, while Labour has nudged up 1 point to 28%. Support for ACT has dipped to 8%, while New Zealand First is steady on 6%. The Greens got a slight bump to 12%. And Te Pāti Māori is up 1 point to 4%. Labour leader Chris Hipkins has taken a dive in the preferred Prime Minister stakes, tumbling to 15%, while Christopher Luxon is on 25%. Also making an appearance in the preferred Prime Minister stakes is Green Party leadership hopeful Chloe Swarbrick on 4%. Our Deputy Political Editor Craig McCulloch joins us now. Craig, at this point in the election cycle, what is this? A measure of popularity?
Kia ora, Lisa. Yes, the first One News Varian poll since the election. It's that first finger in the air from either TV station. What it is showing is effectively not much has changed since the election. In terms of the seats, we're looking at Labour up 1 and ACT and New Zealand First down 1 each. Everyone else is basically where they were. This is not a major shake-up, despite the government's action plan, its 100-day plan, but despite its major rollback and the coalition tensions, despite everything that happened at Waitangi with the backlash, despite all of that, public sentiment is roughly where it was on October 14. The public made its verdict known back then, and now it does seem to just be waiting patiently for everyone to follow through on their commitments.
So, do you think that Christopher Luxon would be happy with that in the National Party?
It hasn't been the best start to the year for Christopher Luxon. He's been undermined by both of his coalition partners at various points, New Zealand First right from the get-go. In terms of Winston Peters' feud with the media, then more recently we've seen ACT and its treaty principles bill. There is no big bump in popularity here, no surge in support, which you sometimes might see in an initial poll after an election. But equally, no massive falling away. People are giving this coalition a chance. They're giving National a chance. And remember, it's only been 4 months since the election, so the real test is going to come in maybe 1 or 2 years' time, at which point voters will be asking, have their lives been materially improved? For now, I do think they understand it takes time before there is we see the results of that action.
As you say, Christopher Luxon has been navigating some pretty tricky waters, some big political scene-setting events like Waitangi. At the same time, ACT has been pushing its treaty referendum. Its support has dropped. Only a small amount, to be fair. What does that tell us?
The coalition parties, both of them actually, have been taking up a lot of the media space of late, largely in those areas where the government's been facing criticism. So yes, ACT and the Treaty Principles Bill, New Zealand First and the smoke-free changes. Now, I would expect that neither party is all that concerned by either that coverage around those issues or the poll movement here. They will see these opportunities as a chance to make their case, more column inches, more time on the radio, more time on the TV to speak to their supporters. Now, both have seen, as you point out, a small nudge down here. Nothing significant. We're still looking at a clear three-way coalition government, three parties, National, ACT and New Zealand First. No one in those parties is going to be panicking over a result like this.
That naturally leads us to the opposition. So, Labor, up as a party, but does Chris Hipkins has a future as the leader?
Isn't it interesting? That initial period of any new government is very difficult for the opposition. Labor's obviously been turfed out. It's old news, and it is battling that threat of irrelevance. It has seen that very small tick up across the board, but those government benches are still a long, long way away. They're unlikely to be taking too much heart from that. It's that opposite story to the government parties. And more worrying for Chris Hipkins will be those preferred Prime Minister numbers. You point that out there. A devastating drop for Chris Hipkins, dropping 10 points to just 15%. Now, I will point out Christopher Luxon hasn't shifted. He's stuck on 25%. I suspect he's not all that thrilled about that either, as a new Prime Minister often ticks up a little bit as they step into that role. But that problem is nothing compared to Chris Hipkins' problem. Again, just 15% of people want him to be Prime Minister again. Now, last week he was saying, I wouldn't expect there to be much movement in the polls for at least the first year of this term. Obviously some expectation management going on there, but he will be worried about his job security. When he looks at numbers like that, he will be feeling a little nervous. Fortunately for him, there is not a successor waiting in the wings, so to speak. There is not someone in Labour ready to roll him and take over. But if those polls stagnate, then it is only inevitable that those rumblings will get louder.
Is the successor in the opposition stakes Chloe Swarbrick? It is very difficult to move the needle in the preferred Prime Minister stakes, and she is on the board, right?
She is indeed the likely new Greens co-leader, Chloe Swarbrick, coming in there at 4%, up 2 percentage points. I would watch that very closely to see whether that rise continues, particularly once she does take that helm as is expected. Now, the Greens have held where they are, and they will be very pleased with that. It's been a shocker start to the year for them, with only bad headlines, really, a really turbulent time. What with the Golbees-Garman scandal, and then, of course, James Shaw calling time on the leadership. So, with that in mind, standing still in terms of their result is a victory. It suggests that their supporters are either looking through this noise, or perhaps that they're not paying much attention. Will they pay more attention once they have a new co-leader in place, once Chloe Swarbrick takes that position? That's what we're going to be keeping an eye on.
Thanks for the analysis. That is Deputy Political Editor Craig McCulloch there. National still holding 38% of the party vote, same as on election night. ACT has dipped a little to 8% there. More than 400 people have been arrested across Russia for making tributes to Alexei Navalny, Vladimir Putin's most prominent political opponent. Navalny died in murky circumstances at a jail in the Arctic. His death has sparked international condemnation, with memorials memorials and vigils held in a number of countries. The US and British ambassadors to Moscow have laid flowers too. The BBC's Sarah Rainsford filed this report.
Ever since the death of Alexei Navalny, Russians have been leaving tributes, pausing to remember a man who dared to stand up to Vladimir Putin and who has died in prison for his politics. This woman describes Navalny as a hero. She says he fought for Russia to be free, a democracy, she says, not a dictatorship. They are strong words in a country that does this when people come to lay flowers. Since Alexei Navalny died, several hundred people have been arrested across the country. The Kremlin doesn't want sorrow turning into anger and into mass protest. So in Moscow, one memorial has now been fenced off, access restricted. And up in St. Petersburg, men clear away the flowers, so the scale of support for Navalny isn't obvious. But each time, there are more people and fresh tributes. The last known images of Navalny on a video link from prison to a court. His cheerfulness is an act of defiance in itself. He died the next day. We still don't know the cause. His mother travelled to the Arctic region to get her son's body and to find answers. So far, she has neither. Navalny's team are accusing the authorities of hiding something. They have reason for suspicion. 3 years ago, the politician was poisoned with a nerve agent. The risks of returning to Russia after that were always clear. And that's true for others who've spoken out too, like Vladimir Karamurza, also poisoned and then arrested for condemning the war on Ukraine. His wife says the death of Alexei Navalny underlines the immense cost of dissent.
I was horrified, but not surprised, because the use of political assassination as a method of dealing with opponents has been there for the entire rule of Vladimir Putin.
Navalny was Putin's loudest challenger. His sudden death leaves many questions unanswered, and it leaves a family and followers to grieve. This evening, his wife Yulia posted a single image. The caption just says, "I love you."
It is 17 minutes past 6, and you're with Checkpoint on RNZ National. To Gaza now, from where we bring you the story of a young woman and her disabled brother who are desperate to escape the besieged city of Rafah. But no matter how many times they try, Tala and her brother Yazid are turned away at the border. The BBC's Fergal Keane has been following their story and filed this update.
We came back to no electricity, no food for today.
She's been a constant, caring voice from within the siege.
And one more day closer to my brother running out of medications, and we're still here.
Tala Abu Nahle's daily life a relentless struggle to care for her disabled brother Yazid. 3 times they tried to escape Rafah, like last November when our cameraman first met them at the border.
But we're trying to do anything that we can to do to survive, because I simply don't want to die at 24.
They didn't get out of Gaza then. Back home, amid the constant noise of drones overhead, Tala tried to comfort Yazid. And then, just a few days ago, we had news from Cairo. They'd escaped to the safety of a flat in the Egyptian capital. Tala described the moment they left.
I can't hear drones anymore, and I can't see. I'm sorry. I won't be hearing any bombings or any airstrikes, and it felt really surreal.
But normality, even being able to boil a kettle for tea, has brought uncomfortable feelings.
This is one of the hardest feelings to talk about.
Tala carries the memory of the people she's left behind.
every time I have food to eat, or I don't have to go running for water, or knowing that everything is available, it makes me feel even guilty to think about everyone in Gaza, the 1.2 million people who are displaced in Rafah right now.
But they had to leave. Yazid's medication had run out, worsening his condition.
He would have a seizure every time he heard bombing. And it got really scary, like his body and his mind is not being able to understand everything that's going on.
Tala knows a world beyond Gaza. She studied in the US, lived with an American family. She won a fellowship for young leaders funded by the State Department. But always coming home to Yazid, here together in 2021. Will she return to Gaza?
I don't know how long is it going to take. But I would want to be part of rebuilding it and healing it. I think everyone who leaves Gaza still does not leave them.
The Cairo sky is safe, but it's not the sky of home.
And across the Tasman, leaked emails have revealed supermarket giant Coles has been profiting from higher prices at the checkout, despite assurances to the public it was doing everything in its power to keep grocery prices low. The revelations have come in the ABC's Four Corners program. Angus Grigg from the ABC with the story.
Woolworths and Coles are known as the fresh food people, the home of everyday low prices. But in recent months, their relationship with consumers has fractured.
This is an absolute joke. This just cost me almost $400.
2 packets of chips for $11. I thought maybe it's wrong.
As prices have risen, so has consumer anger. Both Woolworths and Coles insist they are not profiteering from inflation, passing on only necessary cost increases. But industry insiders interviewed by Four Corners have a different view.
It's absolutely ridiculous. The margins that they make, the tactics that they deploy. I think the current situation's gotten extremely out of hand.
This man, who asked not to be named, works for a multinational company selling products into Coles. He cites an example from last year where Coles profited from his request for a 5% price increase. He says Coles initially denied the request.
He rejected or said, I can't accept this cost increase based on the current climate and the impact on consumers.
That signalled a start to negotiations, where Coles sought compensation for the price increase, arguing its bottom line would be hurt.
We ended up giving a lump sum of money to get the price increase through, which was accepted in full.
That lump sum was a $25,000 payment from the supplier to Coles.
So you're saying that they will validate your price increase if you give them either more margin or a lump sum of money?
Correct.
Coles pocketed the money and passed on the full price increase. Coles CEO Leah Weckett says this is not indicative of how the supermarket operates.
So you have an email from one supplier. We have over 8,000 suppliers that we work with. We have a team of people whose job it is to look to validate cost price increases, and we take that job very seriously.
He says that's the definition of price gouging. Is that the case?
We don't engage in practices like that.
Another industry insider has told Four Corners that 18 months ago, Woolworths began trying to increase its own profit margins using economy-wide inflation as cover. The person said Woolworths asked that a portion of any price increases granted to its suppliers be rebated to the supermarket giant. Woolworths CEO Brad Banducci said his business does not operate this way.
In a warm-up to next month's Oscars, Hollywood A-listers have turned up in London for the 77th BAFTA Awards. Oppenheimer has swept the board at the BAFTAs in London, winning 7 gongs. The surreal comedy Poor Things also took home 5 awards, with Emma Stone winning leading actress. But again, there were some notable snubs. The BBC's Katie Razzle was there.
For one night only, London was a who's who of the movie world.
With the president of BAFTA, the Prince of Wales, attending his most high-profile royal engagement since his wife's operation and the King's cancer diagnosis.
This red carpet is heaving with the kind of star power only the biggest night of the British film calendar can deliver. A night to celebrate talent on screen and behind the camera, here in Britain and across the world.
Yeah! It is no exaggeration to say this room has in it the greatest actors in the world. Yes!
Inside the Royal Festival Hall, Master of Ceremonies David Tennant got down to business.
Right, let's give out some BAFTAs!
A night of laughter, but also emotion, particularly when Davine Joy Randolph picked up Best Supporting Actress for playing Mary Lamb, a bereaved mother and school cook in The Holdovers.
There have been countless Marys throughout history who have never got the chance to wear a beautiful gown and stand on the stage here in London.
Best Actress went to Emma Stone for Poor Things. The Frankenstein-style fantasy walked away with 5 awards in all.
I really want to just thank my mom, because she's the best person I know in the whole world, and she inspires me every single day.
And Stone beat, amongst others, Margot Robbie. Barbie, the biggest grossing movie of the year, was entirely snubbed at the BAFTAs. Bradley Cooper's Maestro and Martin Scorsese's Killers of the Flower Moon also walked away with nothing.
The Zone of Interest.
Instead, a British film, in German, about the Holocaust triumphed. The Zone of Interest picked up 3 awards, including Outstanding British Film and Film Not in English.
Cillian Murphy.
Acclaimed director Christopher Nolan has never won a BAFTA. His film about the father of the atomic bomb now has 7. Cillian Murphy is Best Actor, Robert Downey Jr. Best Supporting Actor, and Nolan himself Best Director.
This is an incredible honour, being back home, getting this from BAFTA, in the festival hall where my mum and dad used to drag me to make me have some culture.
Michael J. Fox, diagnosed with Parkinson's disease 30 years ago, got a standing ovation.
A movie can change your day. It can change your outlook. It can sometimes even change your life.
In a surprise appearance, he handed out the biggest award, Best Film.
Oppenheimer.
Oppenheimer's Night to Celebrate, a night that may just be repeated at the Oscars in 3 weeks.
In the US city of Seattle in Washington state, a group of bikers have survived a close encounter with a cougar. When a cyclist was attacked by a wildcat, others rushed in to pin it down until help arrived. King 5 News' Julie Calhoun has the details.
News of a cougar attack, startling to those hitting the trails.
I'm shocked, definitely shocked. Never heard of attack of cyclists. I thought they mostly attack, hikers in remote areas in the wilderness.
It's kind of surprising just because I don't worry about cougar attacks necessarily. I tend to think of them as being pretty rare.
But early Saturday afternoon, a cougar attack on a group of 5 cyclists, injuring a 60-year-old woman. Her fellow bikers pinned down the cougar until a Washington Fish and Wildlife agent was able to get there.
They did struggle with this animal. They did fight back. And if it wasn't for these people, the lady that was attacked would be in much worse shape.
Agents did shoot and kill the cougar, which was a kitten around 6 months old, according to the Fish and Wildlife statewide cougar specialist.
It is likely the younger ones who cause the most trouble because they're still figuring things out. They're still figuring out how to take down prey, what's good.
The group was in a wilderness area along Tokal Creek, 5 miles north of Snoqualmie. A second cougar was spotted by one of the cyclists and took off. While it didn't attack anyone, Fish and Wildlife searched for the animal using hounds to track it. But by nightfall, had to stop the search.
Where this happened was close to a creek, where's their natural place to follow because that's where prey goes. These bicyclists just happen to be in that place at the wrong time. They don't look for people to stay away from people 99% of the time.
WDFW says cougar attacks are rare in the state. In the last 100 years, there have been 2 deadly attacks and 20 that left someone hurt, and has advice on what to do if you encounter one.
Don't act like a prey, make noise, act big, don't run, don't approach him.
And now, those biking the trails, keeping an extra eye out.
I'll just be a bit more cautious, yeah.
Before we go, your feedback suggests overwhelming support for day trippers to pay for access to the national parks. This person says charge $1 for a wee, $2 for a pee. Bit awkward declaring your intentions. How about a flat fee for the loo paper? And tune in tomorrow at 5 a.m, because first up is going to talk benefit sanctions with the Finance Minister. Join us for that one.
RNZ News headlines at 6:30. Tēnā tātou, I'm Evie Ashton. A new One News Varian poll puts support for the National Party at 39%, the same as it was on election night, while Labour has nudged up 1 point to 28%. The results would